Start this week's update off with a look at the Luburnum tree in my front yard. It's in full bloom now. It's sort of a cyclical thing, though. This is the year that it isn't having as many blossoms. Last year it was loaded, so probably next year will be another good year for it. It seems every other year it really puts on a great display. I think you find it marketed in the garden trade as a golden chain tree. It looks very much like wisteria, only instead of being mauve or blue or purple, whatever you want to call them, wisteria color, it's a bright yellow. This is for my YouTube friend Gia de Cadien. I was going to show you the difference between my Jerusalem artichokes and yours, but now that I'm out here looking at them, I guess I see more similarities than differences. This is the second year for these ones. They didn't bloom for me last year. They also didn't grow as nicely as this, so I'm expecting to have blooms this year late. Well, they usually don't bloom until mid-August or later. I guess they're around in the fall anyway. At this rate, I'm never going to get around to showing you the garden, but I have to do a little shot of this rose. It's my favorite rose, Rosa Fotidia harrisonii, which is Harrison's yellow. A very old rose, only blooms once a year in late June, early July. It's a double yellow, lovely thing. Well, the greenhouse tomatoes have had 2 applications of Compost Tea. They're not yet as dark as the ones that are out in the garden. Maybe they never will be, I don't know. But they certainly have darkened up a lot. And as you can see, I have installed my elaborate support system here. Just garden twine, jute. I put it down under the grow bags and tie it up to bamboo canes that I have running along the ceiling of the greenhouse. About 5'7" or 8" high. That's as high as I dare to let these things go anyway in our climate. But as you can see, things in here are growing quite nicely. Whoa, that was the door closing behind me. The greenhouse cucumbers have really progressed this week. Over here I have 2 of the China red eggplant. One that's doing wonderfully, and the other one is sort of just sitting there. I guess it's been chewed on some by maybe, I don't know, I suppose slugs could have got in the greenhouse, but I have put some slug bait out. It still looks like it's alive. It's just not growing as well as its companion there. I am amazed at these things, these ground cherries. I have no idea what to expect. I didn't even know they existed until this winter when I bought the seed. But I've also given them some support because I don't have any idea how tall they grow. You remember my experiment a little while back trying to figure out if this tree is a plum tree or not. I went and got a branch of plum blossoms off of a neighbor's tree and put it close to the tree here to see if the bees would cross-pollinate for me. This is the second year that it bloomed. Last year didn't set any fruit at all. It doesn't have a lot of fruit on it, but it has set fruit, and it's definitely a plum, at least in my opinion. We'll see what happens when it gets a little bit bigger. So I guess I'm going to have to buy it a mate. Maybe some trouble with the sound quality. We're having quite a bit of wind this morning. The forecast says that we could be getting up to 45 miles an hour winds in gusts just for this morning. Supposed to get better this afternoon. And the forecast is for temperatures of 26 degrees, so it's really turning into summer here. These are the peas that have been climbing quite well this week. I wouldn't be surprised to see blossoms on the lower parts of them soon. They're doing very well. I'm very pleased with the results of using the Compost Tea. I think I have 2 things happening here. It says that the Compost Tea, and what I've been able to read, not only feeds the plant, but it enables the plant to better use the nutrients in the soil. Well, just before we had that week of rain, I put a application of a slow-release organic fertilizer around all of the established plants. And I think the Compost Tea is not only feeding the plants, but it's allowing the plants to use that nutrient that I put in the soil. Wonderful results. Some things are quite a bit greener. Everything is perked right up. I guess standing at attention is the way I've been describing it. Some things were kind of yellow and flopping prior to the application, and since I put Compost Tea on a couple of applications. I'm noticing a really good difference. These brassicas are much darker green than they were, and they're looking much healthier, putting on some really good growth. And the beets that were kind of yellow are now standing right up, and all the new foliage is much darker color. This is the patch of lettuces that I haven't been too pleased with their progress. They are starting to grow better than they were, so I think there's some improvement there as well. But the other ones, as you can see over here, are still doing very well. And actually, I've had my first harvest. I have eaten some of the lettuce from the black-seeded Simpson, which is a leaf lettuce. So I've used some of the outside leaves, nice crisp and green. I lost 3 of the pea plants in this one cell. They just sort of turned yellow and were starting to wilt, so I went over and gave a little tug on them, and they were no longer attached to their roots. They were still standing there, and I guess it must have been a cutworm. All 3 of them were cut off below ground level. I've reseeded, and I dug around and could not find the critter. But anyway, it's been 3 or 4 days ago, and nothing more has been cut down since then, so maybe he moved on. My garlic, the variety Fish River No. 3 that I brought in from Salt Spring Island in British Columbia, is starting to produce what they call scapes, S-C-A-P-E-S, garlic scape. Garlic, at least the hardneck variety, which this is, reproduces asexually. There's no blossom, no male, no female parts. It grows this thing here, which looks like you're going to have a blossom on it, but inside of it, it produces little garlic bulbs called bulbules. And you can save those, replant them, and eventually they will grow on into larger garlic plants. But from everything I've been reading on the internet, it recommends to cut these off because the garlic plant is wasting energy growing it and isn't putting that energy into the bulb that's under the ground. So as soon as they get a bit bigger, I'm going to cut them off because they say they're very good either steamed like you would green beans or in a stir fry. So the entire scape, the whole length of it, can be diced up and eaten. So I'm going to have a meal of scapes one of these days. This particular cell of Florence Fennel is doing very well. If you look down at the base, you can see where the bulb is starting to form. Unfortunately, I guess it's all going to be ready at the same time. What I'm going to do with that much fennel, I don't know. I like it diced up in a salad. I've never had it cooked, but I guess you braise it and it's good cooked as well. But I'll hand some out as gifts to neighbors, I guess. The carrots are starting to grow a bit. In this particular cell, you probably can only see the ones that have got their ferny foliage. It's supposed to be 16. I think I've counted 18 in this cell, so I must have dropped a few seeds. But I've given them an application of the slow-release organic fertilizer this week, and they've had a couple of waterings with the compost tea, so I'm hopeful of them starting to improve. They've been very slow. I've never seen anything like it. They germinate, come through the soil, 2 leaves, and they just sat there for weeks afterwards, but they are starting to move. I don't know how well this is showing up, but that's my first tomato blossom. It's on one of the plants that I bought from a garden center, and when I first planted them in the garden, they were under a pop-up greenhouse here, doing very well. The variety is called Big Beef, which for a vegetarian isn't very encouraging, but I guess it means it's a big red tomato. We'll have to see later on. I lost all of the cucumbers in one cell, mostly I think because of the crows. I replanted that cell yesterday with some more peas because it's next to a trellis here that they could grow up. I'm going to have to put row cover or something out here though, because I'm sure the crows will pull the peas up as soon as they come out. And the remainder of my cucumber plants out here I'm not very impressed with. They are getting a bit greener after a couple of applications of compost tea, but they've been very yellow and they haven't grown very much, so I don't know. I've done something wrong, I guess. I don't think I've given them any of the slow-release fertilizer yet. Maybe this week I'll give them an application. I guess that's all I have time for this week. It's just a little shot of the squash and pumpkin plants that are coming along nicely.